Hey everyone, welcome back to Citywide Bytes. I'm your host, Max Bowen. Can a loving relationship survive career setbacks, infidelities, and mismatched sexual desires? This is the question posed in Bonnie Comfort's book, Staying Married is the Hardest Part. In this episode, Bonnie talks about her 30-year marriage to Bob, a Hollywood screenwriter, and the various challenges they faced along the way. She also talks about her message to readers and how it was facing her own life in the writing process.
Okay, Bonnie. To start this off, Bonnie, I want to ask about the choice you made to write a book that puts your entire life, your 30-year marriage, and everything that happened there out to the world. What was the thinking behind this?
Well, my thinking behind, well, first of all, when I wrote it, I was not writing it thinking I'm sending this out into the world. I was really doing therapy on myself because I was heartbroken over losing my husband. We'd been together for 33 years, and I just kind of had to process my grief. I wrote this book for probably 10 years. So I started right after he died. And about 2 years in, I mean, I was practicing full time. I'm a psychologist, so I was practicing full time. And in my evenings or weekends, I was doing this just to, kind of deal with everything I was feeling. So it wasn't until I had done a lot of work on that grief that I began to allow myself to think about the things in my marriage that were hard for me, that I felt angry about. And that's when I started talking about the sexual conflict between us and how difficult that was for me. So, um, and I kept writing it when I finally got to the point where I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to publish this because I had a previous novel that was published that did very well. I hired a private editor and I said, "Oh, I don't know. Should I tell it? Should I send this out into the world?" And he said, "Bonnie, if you don't tell that part, you just have a boring story about a happy marriage." So, so, so I said, "Okay, okay." But I was worried about not so much the opinion of strangers, but the opinion of family and friends.
Okay. And how did your family react to this once this book was published?
Lukewarm.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah, my family. You said how?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're proud of me for putting myself out there, but they also feel like this why again why did you have to tell this, or Bob isn't here to tell his side of it. And my niece, who's very funny, when I said to her, my manuscript's 100,000 words and they want me to reduce it to 80,000, she said, "Well, if you just take out the word orgasm, that'll take care of it."
Okay then. Interesting.
Right?
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So clearly, this book, you're holding nothing back. But were there parts that were a real challenge for you to just get out there on the screen, knowing again that everyone's going to read this thing?
Yes, yes, because I'm talking about, when I was younger, when I was single, particularly, that I was faking orgasm. I never did it with my husband, but faking orgasm is an issue that women don't talk about, but almost everybody does some of the time or once in a while. So that was embarrassing. And also, one of the reasons I wanted to do this is because I've seen hundreds of patients over the years, but everybody tends to think that a therapist's life is, they've really got it together. And I partly wanted to write this to say, we're just like everybody else. We just have more knowledge. And when we see you, we put aside all of our private stuff and focus entirely on you and can be effective that way. So, but I just thought it was good to normalize, therapists.
Yeah, yeah,
Always coming across as relationship experts, and their lives are messy too. Our lives are
sure.
messy.
You know, since your family brought this up, I do want to ask, how do you think Bob would kind of look at this book? What do you think he would have to say about this?
Well, I've asked myself that many times. I think he would be proud of me. And I think that I was very kind to him in the writing of this. I explained a great deal about why he was, sexually shaped in the way that he was, and he knew that it was a struggle for us and for me, and it was a source of great conflict. So I think I think he would be okay with it, but I think, in some ways, maybe he would have rather that I kept his privacy. I'll never know.
Of course, and I'm really, really sorry, to
Yeah.
hear of his passing. I mean, it sounds like you 2 there were, of course, ups and downs, but it sounds like there were some good times there too.
Oh, 80% good times. 80%.
Nice.
We had a fabulous life together. He was hilarious, brilliant, a very successful screenwriter, and he was somebody who could just hold an, a, a room captive because he was witty and funny in the moment, not somebody who was telling jokes,
Mhm,
canned jokes, but just who was hilarious on a daily basis. So I had a wonderful time with him. I gave up a lot to stay with him. I loved LA. I never wanted to leave LA, and he got to the point where he just couldn't tolerate being there. I had to choose between the place that I loved and the man that I loved, and I chose him because I realized wherever he was home to me.
mhm. Exactly,
Take that
exactly.
away.
Um, how did the 2 of you meet? I'm really curious about that.
Well, we met at a party, an afternoon wedding reception, but the hostess was very good friends with him. I met him. I thought he was kind of, interesting or charming, but then I went home and kind of forgot about it. And I guess he called her and asked her, could I have her number? Or do you think? So he called me and asked me for a date. And at the time I had somebody else in the living room, and I said, well, yeah, okay, call me back. And then he never
Yeah.
called back. So then I called her and I said, well, this Bob Comfort, he called me, he never called me back. Do you have his phone number? So she said, yeah, she gave me his phone number. I said, do you think I'd like him? She said, yeah, I think you'd like him. He's really funny. And he's Canadian too, like you were. So I called him and I had a wonderful phone conversation with him that lasted an hour. And at the end, he said to me, so why did you call me? I said, well, I was lonely. And later he told me two things. If you hadn't called me, I never would have called you back because you sounded lukewarm from the first time I called you.
Oh,
And the other thing he said was, you told me you were lonely. And I really liked that you were honest with me because I was lonely too. So that's how I met. And within 2 weeks, he asked me to marry him, 2 weeks of seeing him. Then
wow.
I know we had this wonderful first date. And the next morning he called me and he said, I just want to tell you I got to understand he was doing a children's show on TV at the time. He said,
Mhm.
did you look at the show? I said, yeah, you were in a chicken suit. And
The
then you
things
were
you
in a
do.
biking costume. I said, yeah, I liked it. He said, I just want you to know I had a wonderful time last night and I think I'm going to fall in love with you and don't break my heart. And I
Wow.
know, I was so touched by somebody that would be that vulnerable right away because so many men are so guarded.
Mhm.
I dated a lot. I had dated a lot. I'd had some long-term boyfriends, but I'd also been very busy in between. And I'd also dated a lot of doctors and lawyers because I worked in a hospital. And there were so many men who were guarded and wouldn't have opened themselves up that way. So I just loved him right away. And we
Well,
had a
that's
relationship in which we checked in with each other. We told each other everything. And I felt always that he cared about how I was feeling, what I was thinking. And I'd care about him. So that was a big glue between us.
mhm, okay. One thing I do wanna ask about is the book talks about the 2 of you having these, like, mismatched sexual desires. Um,
Yes.
wh what were these and how did you, navigate them?
It was not easy. I
Yeah.
wanted somebody who was very confident in bed sexually, who would do anything I wanted and let me know that. And I was anxious in bed if I was with a guy who was, okay, well, I've been down here for 5 minutes. Are you going to come now or not? That was that was the kiss of death for me. So I came into my relationship with him kind of insecure in that way, needing extra reassurance. He, on the other hand, was very uncomfortable giving oral sex or even, using his hands. His big thing was he loved tall, large-breasted women who could orgasm quickly during intercourse. But that was not me. And so we were mismatched in this way. And he'd been raised in a very restrictive, fundamentalist Christian religion. I was raised in a Jewish home, so we were mismatched in that way because sexuality was fine in my home, and in his it was a terrible sin. And so he had to kind of steal sex, and his way of doing it was to kind of peek at women, or to be so brazen and like women who were so brazen that he felt he had permission. So in those ways we were not a great fit for each other.
Hmm.
um, but both of us were so honest with each other about it that it really, right from the beginning, we negotiated a compromise that worked for us, which involved a vibrator for me. So, because I said, in those days, a vibrator was not talked about, and it was kind of, I mean, today you can walk into any drugstore, see 1,000 choices
Yeah,
on
they're
Amazon,
they're
not
not really
like,
hard to find.
yeah, right. But then it was, and he said to me, well, I told him, he said, well, I think of the vibrator as my friend. Get it out. Let's use it. And so I never worried about not being able to orgasm with him anymore. So that was helpful.
Hmm. Okay. One thing I read in the book is that after Bob passed, you had to sort of go back and examine your own role in your
Yes.
lives.
Yes.
What exactly did you see that as?
Well, I'll tell you the thing that I realized after he died. Okay. He and I started fighting about sex early in our relationship, not in the beginning because we had sort of agreed on this compromise, but after 4 years together, he shut down. He just stopped wanting to have sex. And that I was quite frustrated and upset with that. And I'd nag him about it. And after a while, he said to me, look, I'm doing the best I can. I'm just not up for it right now. Just go out and find it somewhere else and don't tell me about it. And don't do it with any of my friends. And I'm a marital therapist. I said, that is not going to work. That's not a good solution. But he kept saying this over and over until finally I thought, fine, okay, I'm going to do this. So I started having affairs. They were not people I loved. I didn't find sexual satisfaction in it, but I did it because I was angry and because I liked the attention. So after some years, he said to me, so did you ever fool around? And I said, I'm not going to talk to you about that. And he said, oh, so you have. Being the insightful man
Yeah.
he was. He said, well, tell me all about it. It'll turn me on. I won't be mad. I told you to do it. I won't be mad. So I believed him. And I said, okay. And I told him, and he said, wow, I had no idea. You really hit it well. He said, well, this really turns me on. Now I want to see you with somebody else. Let's call one of those guys and we'll have a threesome. I said, no, I don't want to do that. I do not want to do that. But what happened after that was he started pressuring me to expose myself to other men in public. And I really didn't like it. And I would sometimes it was playful, he loved lingerie, so I'd dress up in my lingerie and he'd say, well, pick up your skirt or, undo your button on top and that was okay. But then it got worse. And so we would argue and I would fight and I would think, I can't stay with him. This is completely unacceptable. And that went on until um, he got cancer, and then he recovered from the cancer. But in the process of it, he said, I feel terrible for having pressured you. I'm not going to do that anymore. And he was able to sustain that for 2 or 3 years, and then he started pressuring me again. What I discovered after he died, what I realized from writing this and thinking about it was that he was really angry that I'd had those affairs. He was deeply hurt and he couldn't admit it because he'd promised me he wouldn't be angry and he'd told me to do it. And so I realized that him pressuring me after he found out about it was his way of trying to overcome his anger about it. Oh, I'll own this. This will be mine. Yeah, I wanted you to do this. Now let's do it together. So I felt terrible because he wasn't there and I couldn't say to him, "Were you really hurt? I'm so, so sorry I did this." Because I never really apologized for it. I was still, you told me to do it, so I did. So that was a huge, shocking discovery that I realized after I died. What was I thinking? Of course he felt humiliated. Of course he felt deeply hurt. That's why he was so surprised that I pulled it off without him realizing. So that's a really sad thing I wish I could talk to him about.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that you've been together for 33 years. Very long time to be with someone. What would you say kept the two of you together, especially given that there were some fairly rocky times?
Um, well, we had a wonderful time together. We were in tune with each other. We had a great deal in common in terms of life point of view, and he was very insightful and interested in internal dynamics and relationship dynamics. I mean, in the beginning, when I first met him, he said, uh, I said, "I'm a psychologist." He said, "Well, then we're in the same business," because he was a writer. And, to write well, you really have to understand
Hmm.
people. And, so we had a lot of empathy for each other. And we had tremendous amount of fun together. He loved to play games. We had parties. We entertained and I just adored him. And he adored me. It was so great to be with him. So that's what kept me together in spite of the conflict.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Be
I feel like when I talk to people, look, if you've got 70% of a great marriage and the other 30% sucks, you're doing pretty well.
Being a psychologist,
Yeah,
especially one that does deal with like marital issues, did it help you when it came to just like navigating the more difficult times?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I had a tremendous amount of empathy for him, which is something I have to work with couples to drum up because when
Hmm.
they come and they're angry with each other, they're not really feeling empathic and understanding towards your partner. But I did because I knew his struggle. I knew where he'd come from. I knew and he was in show business, which was a frequent disappointment, as you probably know.
Hmm.
Up and down, up and down, up and down, get his hopes up and then have them dashed. And so I felt tremendous empathy for him over that. And then sometimes he would want me to, to sort of cheer him up again sexually in order to keep going, to keep trying to, to make it in Hollywood. And, he did pretty well, but it was, he had wonderful screenplays that were never made, some of them, and that was really heartbreaking for him.
Um,
So yes,
yeah.
I had great empathy and I had relationship skills that some other people don't have.
Hmm. Hmm. I want to ask about the cover art for this book because it is really, really stunning. Why this particular image? Why do you think this sort of sums up the book as a whole?
Why does the cover sum up the book?
Hmm.
Well, it's a photograph of me that he took, and it's been muted so that it doesn't look too provocative. But I think that uh, it shows, the true photograph that has more of my face in it shows how much I loved him, and just in my face it shows that, and how much he loved me because he loved me with his camera. He took thousands of photographs of me, and that was one of our love languages. Put something, dress up and let's take photographs of you, which he did. So um, I don't know. My publisher said this is the one. I said okay.
Okay. All right, Bonnie. Well, we are coming down to the end of this conversation, but the last thing I do want to ask about is Is there a message for the readers that you're hoping to impart with the book?
Yes, there is. One of them is that I think it's important, particularly for women, to be brave in telling their partner what's hard to say, but trying to say it in a kind way, because it's so important to have your voice and to advocate for what you need in a relationship. But the other thing that I have to say is that for both people, finding empathy for your partner, thinking about what is hard for your partner and expressing it is a stepping stone to reconnecting. And in long term marriage, everybody has to sacrifice to some extent. Nobody gets away without making some sacrifice to stay together. And my biggest message is that if you can um, weather these difficult times, there's great value in having a long-term relationship with somebody who witnesses your life.
I like that. I really do. And is there another book down the road for you?
Well, I started as a novelist writing fiction, and I have one book that's a psychological thriller, and I have another one in the drawer that's another psychological thriller. So I think I'm going to be working on that. Yeah.
Nice, nice. All right. Well, folks, you've heard the story. Now, here's what you do you go to bonniecomfort.com. Everything is there. Check out the book. Let us know what you thought. Leave reviews, leave comments. Do you have a favorite chapter, or if you're a part? Did the message get to you? We want to hear all about this one. And Bonnie, thank you so much for talking to me. It's been a real pleasure to just learn more about your story.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's really been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. And for the folks at home, thank you once again for checking us out. This has been Citywide Bytes. I'm your host, Max Bowen, and I'll see you all next time.